The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Tonight's episode is Serving Two Masters, Faith, Business, and the Poor.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm your host, Wade Franson. This is Created in the Image of God. And while I am not a prophet, I'm pre-recording, so I'm going to pronounce that it's June 9th, and this is episode 254. We'll hope that all works out. I have in the studio a gentleman with just an amazing bio and the background and the experience to back that up. Peter Greer, Christ-centered leader, author, CEO of Hope International, a global microfinance and savings ministry that equips families in poverty to start and grow businesses. This is something that he pioneered and piloted in Cambodia, Rwanda, and Zimbabwe. Now, through my own travels and personal experience, it's not easy to get this right. And here's a gentleman who has really done the groundwork, literally and metaphorically, in order to deliver these kinds of results. He has a deep passion for the local church and sustainable solutions to poverty. There are some, perhaps oversimplified analogies, give a man a fish. We'll get into how he views all of that as we get into this interview here. But he helps leaders stay rooted in the gospel while pursuing impact. Through his speaking, writing, and leadership at Hope, he invites audiences to rethink charity, to embrace partnership and dignity, and see business and entrepreneurship as powerful tools for justice and restoration. Welcome to the studio, Peter.
Thanks so much, Wade.
Well, there's really so much packed into that, and I'm glad we have a full hour to start unpacking some of it. But let's start where we always do on this show with your creation story. Who were your parents? Where were you born? What were the forces that shaped you before you were able to wrestle with those forces and take conscious thought on what you wanted to become?
Yeah, so going back to the beginning. Born in Concord, Massachusetts, and Concord, a fame of the Old North Bridge and the shot heard around the world. It's actually the road that I lived on from the moment that I came back from the hospital to the moment that I left for college. So really rooted in Massachusetts, and then had parents that were very active in ministry. So my father was a pastor of a local church, and my mom was very active. She also did work in the public school, and I would say stability. But also stability with global engagement, because my parents gave us this incredible gift that we didn't do a lot of vacations, but we did have the opportunity to go on short-term trips around the world. And I know that's part of your story as well, Wade. And I was really impacted by the opportunity to go and see and learn and experience different cultures. And so grew up with a home that there was always room for one more at the table. Sunday after church, we never knew who was coming over, but we knew someone was going to come over. Someone was going to join us. And so really that outward focus, hands open, always a seat at the table, was the type of background that I was given by my parents. And that hopefully, we try to emulate that gift of hospitality that I saw modeled so incredibly well by my parents.
Sorry, I put myself on mute. I want to comment on a couple of things there before we take your story further. The first one is the way you described Massachusetts. So I'm currently watching something on Netflix called Falling Skies. I don't know if you've ever watched it. It's about alien invasion and whatnot. But anyway, the resistance movement, they start in Massachusetts, and they call themselves the Second Mass Division, right? And it didn't connect. The history didn't connect of why Massachusetts. and it's just fun that the writers of that built that in, that sort of connection to that part of our history. So thank you for that. That was worth the price of entry.
Well,
But
my high school mascot was the Minuteman, Concord Carlisle High School Minuteman, and being ready in a minute to go grab whatever you have. So I think that is woven into the ethos of Massachusetts for sure.
yeah. So the second thing I wanted to comment on is right now I've got a son who's a freshman, daughter who's graduating, and I'm reflecting on how I've done with my kids and my family as they set to move out into the world. And as you talked about your parents modeling that at the table, we've tried to do that as well, but it's a hard balance to get. And so we're actually going to be spending Monday mornings in family consultation in the last month or two of our daughter being at home before going to college, talking about our family life, talking about what we learned, what we could have done better. But it's exactly in that context, using that quote from Lao Tse, who, if there's peace in the heart, there's peace in the home. There's peace in the home, there's peace in the neighborhood. There's peace in the neighborhood, there's peace in the city. There's peace in the city, there's peace in the nation. And of course, in the world, right? So how do you get that balance right? That's the challenge, because too much sort of outward focus, too much of maybe a martyr complex trying to solve all the world's problems ends up with kids who may not share that vision at all because they were somehow slighted. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
So unpack that a little bit for what was it about your family upbringing where you feel it struck the perfect balance?
Yeah.
This is for families listening in who have who need to model this themselves, including me and mine.
Well, I was going to say, including myself as well. I have 4 kids, ages 14 to 21, and very much still in that same conversation, and maybe a little bit similar. We have 2 that have launched and 2 that are still at home, and you look at what can you do. But I think there's 2 things that I really did appreciate from my parents. And I mean, no family is perfect. No parents are perfect. But the 2 things that I think I most appreciated was, 1, a curiosity to get to know other people, other cultures. That is such a beautiful piece because it has an essence behind it of humility that we have something to learn. We have not figured it out. And not like a xenophobia, but as a active exploration. What can we learn about others? And that matched with, there's always an opportunity to help. There's always an opportunity to welcome. Don't wait to be invited into someone else's home. Take the initiative. Go and find that opportunity. Invite them in. And so that curiosity and hospitality, I think, were 2 amazing attributes that we did receive as a gift from my parents, and that I am eager to. I love your intentionality, not missing the remaining time that you have to have those times together. And I think in a very similar way, I've been doing some similar reflection. Oh, how do we pass on those same attributes? And in our family, that was woven in without any pressure, but just a beautiful way that faith was integrated into both of those, the global aspect, believing that God has created incredible diversity in this world, not as something to be feared, but as something to be explored and understood and appreciated. And that hospitality, and everyone is welcome at our home. Let's be on the lookout. Who is lonely? Who is the foreigner? Who is the stranger? Let's invite them in a very literal way. And so I'm so grateful for the way that my parents modeled that in our home. And in a similar way, I hope my kids pick up that curiosity and hospitality as well.
Well, yeah, quick plug. The tagline of this show, Created in the Image of God, building vibrant communities. One of the main principles of how to do that we try to do, it's not always easy, is a humble posture of learning. And you described it so beautifully with curiosity.
Yeah. No, that's it. I love it.
Okay, so you had this amazing background in that part of the nation that led you to sort of have those inputs. Okay, what about high school, higher education, your launch into adulthood? What was involved in that?
Yeah. Some people, it's been fun to watch my kids. Some people, when they're in high school, they know exactly what they want to do and they pursue it. And some I was just interested in playing sports and having fun and getting together, and certainly academics and studies were always interesting to me, but I did not have that clarity. And in many ways, I felt a little bit of a tension that I had this interest in some business, some finance, some entrepreneurship, but then I also had this interest in global missions and service and trying to help and travel and different cultures. And really, it was when I was in college that I would say there are certain moments that we look back, and those are pivot points in our life. And for me, one of those moments was I was studying international business in Moscow as part of an international business institute, traveled around Europe and the former Soviet Union.
What year was that?
I would have been 1995.
So right after Yeltsin, the Gorbachev era, because I was there in, I think, 93. When or 91, whenever Gorbachev was abducted, I was in Leningrad coming in from Finland while tanks were coming from Moscow.
Wow.
And then they laid down their arms and said, we're not Stalin, we're not opening fire on our own people. So you came in, you were there shortly after that. It was a dramatic time. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the moments was we were in Red Square, and Boris Yeltsin was having a campaign rally, and here we are, 20-year-old kids trying to learn, and it just was so profound to realize the significant and seismic changes that were happening at that moment, and to actually be there. And what was really interesting is it wasn't just there, but we were also traveling through France and through England and through Germany and through Switzerland, and so we were traveling through different parts of Europe and the former Soviet Union and St. Petersburg, and it just was profound to have that variety of experiences and to look at businesses. And that was interesting. But the pivot moment was over lunch. There was someone that we met who was doing economic development in the former Soviet Union. And just as you said, Wade, the recognition that this is a turning point. And so what an opportunity. And for him, it was an opportunity to live out his faith, to love others, and to help start small businesses. And watching faith, poverty alleviation, and business come together in this Venn diagram, I was hooked. I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do with my life. And so ended up graduating and did every paper that I could on this new emerging tool of microfinance and economic development, and then ended up getting a job with World Relief doing fraud prevention and internal controls in a rural branch office in Cambodia. And then an opportunity came up, moved to Rwanda to help run a microfinance institution that was emerging from a time of the genocide, was 5 years earlier. And to learn in that context was just an incredible gift. And then to go to Zimbabwe and try and figure out microfinance in the midst of hyperinflation. And what do you do when an economy is just imploding? How can you help with resilience and weathering a storm? And how can you help in rebuilding? And then did graduate school. So really all of my vocation ties back to that pivot point and that one conversation. And so much more. Then when I was in Rwanda, that's where I married my wife, Laurel. She was there as a school teacher and at Green Hills Academy. And that was an amazing experience. My mom had actually introduced us. Yeah, just this incredible way to start our marriage, living internationally. And anyway, the story goes on, but that's the pivot point vocationally that really for me combined those three areas of I cared about global missions, I cared about global poverty, and I cared about how do we use business and finance and entrepreneurship to find permanent solutions to poverty. And that's what I've been doing with my career.
Well, I think that's a perfect point to end this first segment. When we come back, I'm going to ask you a question about serving two masters and dive into how you've resolved that tension. You probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The audience probably does as well. Don't go anywhere. We're just getting into the perhaps the most fascinating part of today's show. We'll be right back with more of Peter Greer.
Hope International equips entrepreneurs globally to find their hope in Christ and overcome poverty through business loans, savings, and training. Since our founding, We've invested in the dreams of more than 3 million underserved families. Dreams to send their kids to school, improve their lives, and escape poverty. And there are millions more that need our services.
Seen entrepreneurs in all different lines of business and work having their organizations grow and flourish, from pig farmers to clothing stores to home loans, literally building homes. It's been truly incredible. As a business owner, as an entrepreneur myself, you can see that this is an incredible organization. Even though it's 30 years old, I know that the story is just beginning, but it takes incredible support from donors, from investors like us, and I encourage you to take a look at Hope International.
Join us at hopeinternational.org.
Welcome back to Created in the Image of God. I'm your host, Wade France, and I'm here with Peter Greer, who is the CEO of Hope International. We've just explored his background, how he got to the place where he is now through the connection of finance and faith behind the Iron Curtain in emerging economies, and then tested it in various situations around the world where there was upheaval and turmoil and opportunity, like a plow going through the soil, right? And breaking up that soil so that something new could be planted. So when we plant something, Jesus says every tree that doesn't bear fruit will be chopped down and thrown into the fire. And we need to bear good fruit, right? And not thorns and thistles. And so there's so much that could be said here. I'm going to let Peter start saying it. So Peter, Jesus said you can't serve two masters. You can't serve God and mammon. How do you resolve this tension?
Yeah. I don't think it's, Jesus talks so much about the way that we engage with money, because money, perhaps more than anything else, is a proxy of where our heart is. And we know how easy it is to see money not as a tool, but as the ultimate destination. And I think that's where we get in trouble, when we desire for that, desire for wealth for us. That's when we get in a whole lot of trouble. But Wade, the other thing is true as well. If we have such a fear of it, that then what does that mean? It means that in some places of the world, there's this belief that, well, money is it's so hard not to love it, so let's just ignore it. And what does that mean? That means we're going to be stuck in perpetual poverty. And I don't think that's the way that God designed us. I think we are created to be in relationship and created for generosity. And you know what helps generosity? A little more resources can enable a little more generosity. And so I think it's not an issue of money or heart. It's a question of how do we hold that? And to your point, it's very clear which one wins, which one is rightly ordered loves. And I think that money can be such a great tool when it is underneath us saying, I want to be under the lordship of Christ, and then use everything that I have to love, to serve, to bless, not to hoard and collect, not to use and abuse, but to actually have an open-handed posture. And again, real simple, but we were talking about kind of my upbringing. I love that my parents, pastors, didn't have a ton of extra, but the resources they had, they knew what it was for. It was used for others. And I think that is such a beautiful posture. And so around the world, we're just trying to say, let's use this tool so that we can help families generate businesses, start or expand whatever they have in their hands, plant more crops, grow more food, and use it not just for personal consumption, but for the community, for the church, for the family. And I think that's a really powerful, powerful piece. So money is a great tool, a horrible master, but I think we need to have a right way of understanding the power of this tool so that we can grow, we can create, and so that we can hold it with open hands to be used in loving and blessing and serving others. How do you think about that, Wade?
Well, first of all, I think you've really brought up so many awesome points to try to describe, what it looks like to balance those things out. What I think is that I was I was born in Canada, but I was a little American kid living in America when I ended up at age 9 going to Sweden and living with my aunt and uncle there in their family. And I grew up on these epic hockey matches, right? Between Sweden, the humanitarian superpower, the Soviet Union, right? And then America wasn't usually in the mix, but Canada was in the mix, right? So Sweden, the Soviet Union, and Canada in these Olympic hockey matches, right? World hockey. And for those who know the Red Army, right? For the Soviets in that era, this was a political thing to excel at hockey, right? And as a young kid, I was very much aware, almost at too early of an age, you might say, of this ideological difference between communism and capitalism and socialism, which are economic models, right? How to manage the finances. And then getting involved in religion, I was of the kind who kind of feared money. So when I graduated from college, I had a suitcase and a one-way ticket, and I went to Europe and a few bucks in the bank. And I went there to serve, and that was a rejection of the materialism that I found in America. And while I was in Europe, I was kind of anti-American, right? And Gorbachev was a hero, right? They were chanting "Gorby, Gorby," and the Scorpions' winds of change was blowing. And so, and during the Gulf War, it was all you heard in Europe was oil for blood, blood for oil, right? And it's this tension between these economic models and which one's good and which one's bad or better. And I was of the opinion that, if I had wealth, I would somehow be evil. Just by virtue of being successful materially, there was something wrong with that. And I actually was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. So this stuff was deep in me. And then when I moved back to America, by that time I had realized, no, I need to provide for my family. To your point, I cannot be generous. I can't give away the means of production. Right? So you got to balance these things. And so, yeah, it's a big question. And people, the world is aflame and the world is in turmoil over these ideologies. Right? And people don't go enough to the Bible and enough to God in prayer and ask for guidance as how this stuff really works. There's a Baha'i quote that I love. It goes like this: with fire we test the gold, and with gold we test our servants.
Oh, interesting.
Right? But inherent in that is the gold is something God created, and it is purified. He wants it to be pure in that sense, and many things can be done with pure gold. But then it becomes a test on how we use that. So I love the fact that you said it's a tool, matters how we use it. Use the tool, don't become a tool. Don't become enslaved by the tool.
Right. That's a great summary right there. Yeah. Thanks.
So hugely powerful. So this is your life's work, figuring this out. So give us then a couple of examples of how it works in your world and what the results are, and how do you plant the right seeds that really bear good fruit in this regard?
Yeah, well, I really like there's a book called Talks of Charity by Bob Lupton, and he talks about the cycle of giving. And he talks about when you give the first time, there's appreciation. I can't believe you're giving this way. This is incredible. But you give the same gift to the same person the second time, it's not appreciation, it's anticipation. And then the third time it moves to expectation. And then it moves to entitlement. And then it moves to dependency. And what he argues, and what has been argued by many others, is that in the wake of our good intentions are not always good results. And I believe, I love even the title, thinking about what are we created to do? And I think that we have been given this incredible gift to create. This world is incredible that you can take one seed and you can plant it in the ground and you can get 100 new seeds. That is unbelievable math in the way
there's
that
God's generosity for you.
That's it. Yeah, totally. And so I think sometimes we forget that
and then he sends rain on the just and unjust alike.
Right. Yep. So true. Yeah. So we're just trying to figure out, so what does it take to unlock that creativity, that agency, that creativity, and the God-given capacities that every single person has? And so the way that we do that is by investing. We provide investment capital in communities of poverty in some of the most, according to economic indicators, some of the poorest countries on earth, and find that even in those places, people would prefer a job to a handout almost every single time. So we find those entrepreneurs, we invest in them, we coach them, we support them, and then watch what happens in all those places. And then we also provide coaching and training services, and then we also help people save or mobilize savings. We have church-centered savings groups in countries around the world, but it's all around this idea of unlocking the God-given capacity that we believe every single person has. And one of the I love traveling. I love spending time. I was in Peru and Paraguay recently and meeting, individuals that had grown fruit trees in their backyard, or animal husbandry. Spent time with a woman who was so excited about her pigs and about the way that they were growing, and spent time with another woman who said it was always my dream to have a restaurant, and now she has her restaurant. And met time with another individual that was actually a child, and she was selling jewelry in her mother's kind of hair shop. And so just this idea, it doesn't matter if it's a 10-year-old or a 90-year-old, there are gifts that are there that we just try to unlock and unleash. And again, just trying to do that in such a way where individuals know they are loved, know they are created by a God who loves them and has gifted them with different gifts and abilities, and to do it in communities of poverty, and to see the church as a place that is leaning into communities, actively loving and serving as a beautiful way of loving their neighbors. So those are some of the things that we do, and operate in 30 countries now, and have served now 3.8 million families. And we're coming up on $2 billion of total investments with a 98% repayment rate. Just shows that we really can invest in individuals as we share and show God's love.
Well, that's an amazing story. I'm gonna take a couple of assumptions here before I go to the next set of questions. Correct me if any of my assumptions are wrong. One of the assumptions is that one of the challenges in doing this and doing it successfully is that typically in business and business investment, there's this issue of scale, right? The cost of my time and my energy in even having the discussions with the person who's going to, receive this financing. If that's out of balance, right, it costs almost 10 times. I can imagine it could cost 10 times as much to figure out whether or not to lend the money and to manage it than the amount of money that you're actually talking about in this microfinancing. That's part of the issue, right? So I'm sure there's a humanitarian nonprofit attitude that sort of overcomes that hurdle, but still help me understand, what does it look like in practical terms of getting over that initial hurdle of, well, we're this big organization, we live in Western standards, we're working in a different country at a much different economic standard, and that sort of inequality issue up front.
No, you're exactly right. And this is true around the world, but especially true in places of poverty. If you have the opportunity and you're looking to maximize the time and return, would you rather make $1,000 loan, or would you rather make 100 $10 loans? Same amount of capital, vastly different amount of work. And so what happens? You want to minimize your risk. So you want to go with those individuals that have assets, that have collateral. You want to invest in individuals that you can improve their cash flow. You want to invest in individuals that have the ability to have some sort of a credit score. And who doesn't have any of that? The individuals at the bottom of the pyramid, and those individuals that are going to be seen as more risky, as more work for not as much financial return. And there's a reason why the financial sector is designed not to serve individuals in greatest need, but designed to serve those individuals where risk is minimized, loan sizes are much, 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 much larger, and collateral is available to be part of the underwriting process. And so we believe the opposite is true. Let's go to places where the costs are highest, where the need is greatest, where the collateral does not exist.
They didn't teach you that in business school to do that.
No, but the great irony is I believe that we are showing that it can work. if you invest in individuals and do it based on character. And that's really the primary way that we screen, because it's a community that comes together, and that community becomes the social capital for each other. So if you and I are in a group with 15 of other friends, and if I don't repay, I would miss week number 3's payment of my $5.25, you, Wade, say, hey, I will help cover his payment that week. And it's this positive aligning the interest of the group with the ability for us as an organization to put capital at work in communities of poverty. And there's a reason we're set up as a nonprofit. We still take high risk, and the financial model is very different. And yet we believe this is an incredible way to help. And if someone has a job, we don't need to keep providing food for them week after week. If someone has the ability to grow their own, we don't need to keep showing up with a box full of our used clothes. If they have the ability with a sewing machine to start making and repairing and using. And so I just think this is a different way of helping that unfortunately is still too uncommon. When we think about how we help, we often think, what can I give or what can I do for the others? Without asking a different question that leads to a different result is, what do they already have? And how can we help partner and support and unlock and unleash? That's a different approach. And I believe over time, that has such a better result when it's no longer reliant on international charity, but unlocks the capacity of individuals in every community. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create, and it doesn't take away the need for short-term charity. That always is going to need to be there, but to match it with longer-term investment in men and women who are so capable for the long-term development of their communities, of their churches, and of their nations.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you. So 2 follow-on questions to that. The first one is interest and its evil twin, usury. How do you deal with financing from the perspective of interest payments on that $5.20 payment? Is it a strict repayment of capital? Is there any interest component? I'm just curious how you structure that.
Yeah, so 2 elements. One is, I completely agree with you. There is a massive difference between interest and usury. And around the world, if you're in poverty, there is only one option for capital. And it is the local loan shark, and they exist in every single community that I've ever been in. They exist, and it is exploitation. 400% is not uncommon. I remember one time I was having a conversation with an individual, and they said the interest rate is 20%. And I was like, 20%? That's great. In light of the work that I've seen, that's incredible. And then they said, oh no, that's per week. That's not the annual, that's the weekly rate. And so we believe that is exploitation. And so we have a different approach. And our basic model is, how do we break even? How do we have the ability so that we can do this work long term, so that we can cover our costs? And it's more than we can get into now, but you got to look at cost of inflation. And so it's sometimes misleading just to look at the interest rate. You have to look at an inflation adjusted interest rate and to look at the comparison of what the bank rates are. But all of that goes into a system of saying, what we're trying to do here is to have a sustainable way of offering services in these communities. And I'm so grateful for our team that really takes that seriously. But the other piece that is missing, Wade, is I believe that a lot of times organizations focus on loans and don't emphasize savings. And yet for most families, that is underappreciated of just how important it is to have a safe place to save money. And so we really match, don't take a loan for consumption. That's going to harm you. You're going to have to repay with interest. Save for that. And to really look at basic financial literacy that I know you and I both have a heart for, basic financial literacy that says, are you going to generate more return than what it costs you? And if not, do not take an investment for that particular initiative, and to really make sure you know upfront, what are the risks, what are the assumptions, and is this a wise investment or not? So that's maybe a broader piece, but yeah, we create these models to really emphasize savings, as well as provide capital at a rate that is going to be sustainable for the family and for the organization as well.
Wonderful. The other question that I had was, do you have different divisions within Hope International that deal with the financing side and the charity side? How does that work? How do you balance that internally in your organization?
Yeah, so I mean, all of Hope, we're a 501c3. So we're separated into two different parts of Hope. One is the savings group model, that there's no cost recovery. So we basically train individuals around the world of how to form almost like mini credit unions at the local level, but it's their money. They save together, they invest in each other's businesses, they make the rules of what the late payments are, they choose the interest rate that they're going to charge each other. And so it's really financial inclusion at the most basic level. But when those groups gather together, they go through these 5 W's of welcome, worship, word, work, and wrap up. So it's almost like this small group experience matched with your financial needs to save together and invest together. It's just a really fun model that really has an impact in families in poverty around the world. So that's one side of Hope International. And then the other side is our microfinance institution side. And that's much more like, in many ways, it's trying to create banking services for those who previously were unbankable. And in those places, it's, you got to be regulated by the central bank, and you have to have the same liquidity ratios and the capital reserves and the staffing and internal audit, and to make sure that it's a well-run financial institution with just a different target audience, a different target group. So those are the two sides of Hope.
Different accountabilities, right? And different stakeholders and shareholders. We talked briefly in the intro before we launched the recording about integrity, and how in order to really truly have integrity, you need to learn a lot, because the integrity of a charity is different than the integrity of a major financial institution. It's the same spiritually and morally, but different accountabilities, and dare I just try to characterize it as skill sets even, and or competencies, certainly accountabilities.
No, you're exactly right. And I would say for Hope International, our currency is trust. If the families that we serve lose trust in us, we're done for. If the staff that we have lose trust in our mission or in our, they're no longer here. This is not a job for anyone. If our supporters lose trust, they are gone as quick. So trust is the foundation in all aspects, all stakeholder groups. I completely agree with that.
You can never buy back trust. You can't use money to earn trust, because money is money, right? It doesn't. Anyway, it's so. I'm going to share a tiny bit of my background that I don't know if I shared with you, and I don't even think my audience knows. So when I resigned from the ministry in '95, through a couple of years of transition, I ended up at Deloitte Consulting. And I used to do consulting work for financial institutions, which included Washington Mutual, which was then, I think, acquired by Wells Fargo. I can't remember, or Bank of America. I worked a lot with Wells Fargo. And then I went to work for Countrywide, where I was first vice president of strategic planning. And in Countrywide, which is a large mortgage company, the CEO of Countrywide, Angela Mazzillo, ended up on the cover of Time Magazine January 2019 edition as the #1 cause of the economic meltdown. When I left Countrywide, I did this startup called GoHuman.com in California, which was a completely different model. But then I ended up moving to Wisconsin to work for something called CUNA Mutual. CUNA Mutual is the backbone of the credit union movement in America. What the difference is, big banking, right, is, to your point, they're the regulated, large scale financial institutions that form the backbone of our economy. Credit unions are small, locally owned, not-for-profit cooperatives, i.e. the financial salvation of the planet. So when I came to work for CUNA Mutual, they had this thing called, there's this book that sort of lay under the credit union movement, and people don't know Labor Day was originally Labor Monday, and it sprang out of Christian roots, and credit unions were kind of a part of it. But anyway, the book that they had was "The Debt Shall Die with the Debtor." The debt shall die with the debt, because they have intergenerational debt can be inherited, right? So the point is, this is when I got really deep into this, and I'm just like so honored to have you on the show, because intellectually I've dabbled and played in all this, but you've actually gone to do it. I mean, I tried to get a foundation going for homeless children in Chennai. I think we talked about this. And then when the tsunami hit, funds were diverted away from the educational purpose to help humanitarians. And then we lost trust in those people who were investing in the educational endeavor. They didn't like to see that funds were being diverted for a different purpose. However good, however pure the intent and motive, the people on the ground basically destroyed the trust of the organization and it all fell apart. So again, it's not easy to do. I don't know where I was really going with this ramble, other than that when you describe the fact that you're actually helping form cooperatives on the ground that function as credit unions, that's amazing.
Yeah. And Wade, what's so interesting is I think that for many individuals, they understand when they look at their own life. I've been significantly impacted by the fact that I could get a mortgage to buy my house. I've been significantly impacted that we couldn't pay them money for school. I'm really grateful we got an ability to access capital. And you think about these major events, we got into a small amount of real estate, buying rentals. I couldn't have done that on my own, but there was a bank that was willing to lend to me. And all these things, if you look at just our lives, we have been significantly impacted by the ability to get access to capital. And then for many around the world, that just does not exist. And so we know the impact of it. And my guess is if you were to give a quiz for your listeners, identify the top most impactful ways for charitable giving and impact around the world. No one is going to list.
Not a chance.
There's not a chance. And yet it really is so powerful because it unlocks. And so I don't know how maybe we need to change the way we talk about this, but I think when you start pulling the thread and you start looking at what made an impact in your life, the ability to have a job, the ability to have investment, the ability to own a home, like there are these things that have made such an impact. And I'm just so eager to say, let's at least, it doesn't have to be number one on the list, but can we elevate it from not having any thought? It's just not the way that most people think about helping in places around the world. And certainly when it comes to Christian mission, the idea of an organization that's going to help people access capital to form groups and invest in businesses and study scripture together, there's so many elements that is out of the norm. And so anyway, maybe we need a little bit of rebranding help, but I get so excited because the more that you have conversations with, like we're having here, it makes sense. And yet it still is an uncommon way to think about helping others around the world.
Well, I have two ideas, which I'm going to share with you probably after this offline, because we're crashing into a wall here of time. The commodity, the resource that we're running out of right now is time. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, which I predict will either be for chasing dreams or soul seeds, or maybe a combo of the two. When we come back, we're going to ask, where are you growing next? Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of Peter Greer.
In a world where religions often talk past each other, what if we just sat down and listened? Facets of One is a simple devotional, bringing together scripture from the world's faiths, centered on one truth. God is one. From the Bible to the Quran, from Krishna to Christ, each voice speaks in turn, without argument, without division. You don't have to agree on everything. Just be willing to pray, to listen, and to come together. If you're longing for something deeper than noise and division, this is a different kind of conversation. Facets of One. Many voices, one God. Will you start a circle?
Welcome back to Created in the Image of God. I was just joking with Peter that sadly we're running out of a precious resource here, time. So we're going to make good use of that time. Where are you growing next, Peter? What's next on the horizon for you, for Hope International? And how can people get in touch with you? How can people support what you're doing? How can they get involved in that generosity?
Yeah, three things that we're focused on in this season. Number one is agriculture. We have heard again and again and again in the places that we serve that there's so much more that we could do. And with the rising fuel prices, that's impacting food. Hunger is going up and the price of fertilizer skyrocketing. And so doing a lot more with regenerative agriculture as a creative way to love and support families that are living in a really difficult time. And then it's just been compounded by recent global events. So that's one. Number two is partnership. We believe that it is an underutilized tool to actually partner with others. And so we've got these tools of microfinance and savings groups. And our approach is never, how do we grow the mission of Hope International? The goal is, how do we help as many people as possible, as effectively as possible? And so we've had a number of new partnerships where we can go in and train the other organizations of how to use these tools. And it is accelerating the impact in the number of families that we serve. And I love that. And then third, we have been taking these tools to even more marginalized communities, even greater places. And I just think, for me, with my faith, following Jesus means let's go find the most under-resourced, the most challenging places. I think that's where we should be showing up. And the great thing is these tools are such an amazing door opener. And so whether it is a unreached people group, or whether it is in an area of maybe because of a physical or social stigma, they've not yet been seen as kind of full members of community. What an amazing way to go in and with this great tool, these great tools to love and serve individuals. So we've been doing more on frontier areas around the world. So excited about agriculture, excited about partnership, excited about some new frontier areas to serve as well, and doing even more in the years to come.
Amazing. So how do people connect with you? It's hopeinternational.org. Is that right? One word?
That's correct. Yep. All written out, hopeinternational.org.
And there's an about page for you, peterkgreer.com, about, that connects the dots there.
Yeah, that's just, so the writing, we didn't really talk about that, but that's kind of a fun hobby that I have. So if any of the books are helpful, or you want to look more at some of the other writing resources, that's at peterkgreer.com.
Okay, so hopeinternational.org. I encourage everyone, go there, get involved. And Peter, I'm going to extend right now an invitation to come back and talk about maybe some collaboration. Do you do anything in the US, or is it all international?
We looked at that. There are some amazing organizations that do work in the US. And so we have said we're going to focus on the international, and we're going to point individuals to some other great organizations that are operating in the US, but really to go to those, underserved areas around the world.
Awesome. Well, I will look for some pointing to us for the Soul Seeds program in particular. And I'll connect with you offline and invite you back to tell us a little bit more, because I think it feels like we've only scratched the surface of what you do, how you do it, and it would be well worth another conversation. So as we're running out of time here, what are final words for the audience? What would you like to share on your way out the door?
Yeah, maybe just a general piece, which is, when we show up in communities around the world, one of the questions that we start with is, what has God given you? Or stated differently, what is in your hands? And how can we use that to provide? How can we use that to bless? How can we use that to encourage? And so I would just say, for all of us, you are created with gifts and abilities. You are created not just to consume, but also to create, and then to generously give and serve. And so what is in your hands, and how can you use that in loving and serving others?
Awesome. That is so perfectly blended with the title of this show. I don't even need to conclude with my normal concluding tagline for Created in the Image of God. So there you have it. Get connected with Peter Greer and hopeinternational.org. And stay tuned for the sneak peek of what's coming next week on Created in the Image of God. Peter, thank you so much for your time. God's richest blessings to you, so that you might continue this path of generosity, education, service, and providing that hidden leaven in the transformation of the planet into the Garden of Eden.
Thank you, Wade. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Looking forward to connecting again soon. Don't go anywhere. Sneak peek coming up. We'll see you soon.
Next week on Created in the Image of God. Sunday, June 14th at 7 a.m. U.S. Central Time. Host Wade Franson interviews Kelly M. Kapic, theologian, author, and teacher. He reflects on suffering, grace, and the limits of being human, and how embracing our weakness can lead to a deeper, healthier faith. From pain and exhaustion to embodied hope, humility, and learning, we were never meant to do it all. And then on Tuesday, June 16th at 8 p.m. Central Time, host Wade Franson interviews Miroslav Volf, theologian, author, and founder of the Yale Center for Faith and Culture. He explores questions of identity, forgiveness, and human flourishing, and what it means to build a life shaped by reconciliation rather than resentment. From justice and public faith to the deeper pursuit of joy, meaning, and a life truly worth living. Join us live this week, Tuesday and Sunday, Created in the Image of God.